statute. Assistant Bureau Chief Nathan Duvally will now provide you with an overview of the Bureau's compliance and enforcement section.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Nathan Duvally, and I am the Assistant Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Gambling Control's Compliance and Enforcement Section, Audit and Compliance, Compact Compliance Section, Special Program Section, and Administrative Support Group. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My goal is to provide the committee with an overview of these programs and how they play a vital role in ensuring the Bureau's mission, which is to protect the integrity of gaming in California. In regards to compliance and enforcement, the Department of Justice, pursuant to tribal state gaming compacts and the Gambling Control Act, serves in a regulatory, criminal investigative, and enforcement capacity as part of its responsibilities as a state gaming agency. The Bureau routinely conducts criminal investigations into organized crime, money laundering, bookmaking, fraud, embezzlement, robberies, loan sharking, narcotics trafficking, cheating, and transnational gangs operating in casinos and card rooms. The Bureau of Gambling Control Special Agents are frequently called upon, based on their expertise, by local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to assist with illegal gambling investigations, training, and courtroom testimony. The Bureau's primary responsibilities related to tribal gaming include, but are not limited to, the following: general gaming-related investigations, criminal investigations occurring at the casinos, other gaming-related investigations that may potentially violate the tribe's compacted right to offer Class 3 gaming, negotiated via the compacts, such as investigating and enforcing provisions of the California Penal Code and U.S. Government Code, internet cafes, illegal slot machines, illegal home games, routine compact compliance inspections, audits pursuant to the compact terms, routine card room inspections, and preparing reports of findings in accordance with administrative audits and inspection activities. Compliance and enforcement staff have initiated 377 card room, tribal casino, and general law enforcement investigations and inspections between fiscal year 2013-2014 and thus far in fiscal year 14-15. The Bureau currently has compliance and enforcement section offices in Sacramento, Redding, Fresno, Los Angeles, Riverside, and San Diego. While local, state, and federal agencies tend to gravitate towards investigative specialization, the following cases will highlight the diversification and expertise required of a Bureau of Gambling Control special agent. These are some representative samples of the investigations that our Bureau has been involved in the last couple years. First case I'd like to highlight, BGC special agents were called out to investigate a violent robbery involving an assault rifle at a tribal casino. Based on the investigation, review of surveillance footage, and the actions of the suspects, a BGC agent linked the case to a series of brazen jewelry store robberies. The BGC agent coordinated with local law enforcement agencies who were actively working separate cases. The crimes were committed by two parolees who pulled off a series of high-risk armed robberies throughout California. The suspects were convicted of more than 20 counts, including conspiracy, robbery, and false imprisonment. The suspects were wearing bulletproof vests, armed with semi-automatic long guns, and committed robberies in multiple counties. One of the suspects had 2 prior strikes for robbery and dissuading a witness, and several other theft-related convictions, and faced as much as 525 years to life in state prison. The other suspect faced a maximum of 150 years in state prison. Another case, BGC recently investigated a card room case where a high-stakes gambler won approximately $275,000 from a third-party provider of propositional services at a baccarat table. A review of the surveillance video reveals suspicious activity involving the dealer, banker, and the player. Agents conducted a thorough investigation and interviewed all of the involved parties. The player admitted using a video camera up his sleeve to record the cards as they were fanned out by the dealer. The recorded information was analyzed by a co-conspirator, and the information was texted back to the player on how to place bets. The BGC agents prevented the player from being paid out all of the money, and based on their investigation, arrested the player, co-conspirator, dealer, and third-party banker on multiple felony charges. BGC prevented the payment of $275,000 and recovered $23,900 of winnings that had already been paid out. Prosecution is ongoing for that particular case. Another case involving a tribal casino where surveillance personnel at the casino requested assistance from BGC to investigate a cheating scam involving multiple players switching cards. 5 adult males were observed using a variety of techniques to distract the dealer, shield their activities from the floor personnel, while 2 of the players would switch cards under the table. The suspects were identified by BGC special agents as Turkish transnational organized crime members. During the course of the investigation, agents followed the group to the Los Angeles International Airport. Agents coordinated with Customs and Border Protection agents to initiate a search of the suspects as they were leaving the United States. Homeland Security investigation detained the suspects and seized $84,000 in undeclared U.S. currency in their possession. Felony arrest warrants have been issued in the event those suspects return to the state of California. Another case involving an unidentified suspect that was observed marking cards at a tribal casino, causing the casino to be cheated out of approximately $8,000 in known losses. BGC agents conducted a thorough investigation, identified the suspect through mobile surveillance, and with the assistance of the Nevada Gaming Control Board, obtained arrest and search warrants for the suspects at his Las Vegas residence. The suspect was identified as one of the most famous gamblers in the world and was known for the longest run in U.S. history, amassing approximately $40 million before losing it all. BGC coordinated his extradition back to California, obtained a successful felony conviction, and had him added to the California involuntary exclusion list, which I'll speak about later. He was also submitted to Nevada to be incorporated into their black book. BGC agents have assisted local law enforcement with numerous investigations into Internet cafes. Internet cafes are illegitimate businesses that offer sweepstakes prizes, distribute cash based on illegal gaming devices that have the appearance of Las Vegas-style slot machines. Agents have offered undercover work, gaming expertise, search warrants assistance, arrests of suspects, and expert testimony in support of local law enforcement and district attorney offices. And I'll highlight one other investigation involving a card room. A patron was gambling at a Bay Area card room and won approximately $68,000. Upon leaving the casino, he was followed home by suspects in two separate vehicles. Later that same evening, the victim's wife arrived home and was confronted by the suspects, who forced their way into the residence at gunpoint, threatening to shoot the victims. The victims gave the suspects $46,000 in cash. During the commission of the crime, one of the suspects dropped his cellular telephone in the residence. BGC agents working with local law enforcement obtained search warrants for the phone and identified 4 suspects. Numerous hours of surveillance resulted in the arrest and conviction of all 4 suspects, who subsequently pled guilty to armed robbery. One more issue that I'd like to address is on May 14th, 2015, the Gambling Control Commission approved the Bureau of Gambling Control's proposed partial settlement of an administrative action against Garden City, Inc., which is also known as Casino Matrix. The partial settlement has been beneficial to the general public. The fine, which was rose to the level of $1.5 million and cost reimbursement of $275,000, are large enough to deter others from engaging in activities similar to those alleged in the administrative law case and admitted in the settlement. The fine is the largest assessed against a licensee since the Gambling Control Act's enactment in 1997. The substantial fine, large cost reimbursement, and the Bureau's issuance of an emergency order demonstrate that the Bureau and Commission will take actions to stop and will not tolerate the activities alleged in the administrative law case. The partial settlement has been beneficial to the City of San Jose. It remains open under an ownership that is no longer subject to the cloud of a pending administrative law case. The ownership worked with the Bureau and the City of San Jose to eliminate persons who violated or tolerated or counseled violations of the Gambling Control Act and the city's ordinances. As a result of those efforts and restrictions contained in the Bureau's emergency order, Garden City went from a business operating at a net loss to net profits exceeding 20% of its revenues. Garden City employs more than 700 persons and is one of San Jose's largest taxpayers. And moving on to some of the other areas that the Bureau's Compliance and Enforcement section is responsible for, the Audits and Compact Compliance section. The Audits and Compact Compliance section plays a vital role in addressing the more complicated financial aspects of the Bureau's financial suitability investigations for card rooms, vendors, and third-party providers of proposition player services, as well as assisting the Compliance and Enforcement section in its criminal investigations involving financial-related matters. ACCS also conducts on-site financial evaluations of gambling establishments and travel casinos, which involves the analysis of their financial documentation in order to ensure proper internal controls and accounting practices are maintained. For fiscal year 2014-2015, ACCS staff have conducted 8 SDF audits with a total dollar amount of $659,359,850 in Class 3 gaming revenue. General fund audits, 11 of which have been completed with a total dollar amount of $753,248,810 involving Class 3 gaming revenue. The Revenue Sharing Trust Fund, 22 audits have been conducted in that particular area. There have been reviews of minimum internal control standards, electronic gaming device inspections involving tribal casinos, 28 in the last fiscal year. Card room adequate financing evaluations and inspections. There have been 13 completed, which have generated 5 letters of warning issued to address and correct findings. Card room inspections. Licensing requests for initial financial reviews of applicants have totaled 44 over the last fiscal year. Licensing requests for initial financial review of tribal vendors equaling 10. 3 licensing requests for initial financial review of third-party providers of propositional player services applicants, and investigations of financial fraud, skimming, unreliable financial records as part of compliance and enforcement actions totaling 5. The next program I'd like to cover is we refer to as our special programs. Gambling and gambling-related issues have become incredibly high-profile issues in recent years. The Bureau's activities and focus are influenced by changes in the gaming market, expansion of gaming activities in California, legislative activities, both federal and state, and ongoing development and implementation of needed regulations. The special program section is on the forefront dealing with these critical and oftentimes sensitive issues. The special programs section consists of those programs with a high level of sensitivity within the Bureau. Special programs consist of our tribal liaison position, criminal intelligence unit, responsible gambling program, research unit, regulations unit, and nonprofit organization gambling fundraiser registration program. The tribal liaison position was established to serve as a central point of contact in the Bureau's top management structure that can speak with the authority of the chief by fostering a mutually respectful relationship with the tribes. The tribal liaison acts as the Bureau's liaison with the tribal gaming agencies, the Attorney General's Office of Indian Affairs, National Indian Gaming Commission, the California Gambling Control Commission, and other law enforcement agencies, as well as the Governor's Office. The Criminal Intelligence Unit was established to collect, collate, analyze, and disseminate information regarding individuals suspected of crimes in the gambling industry, identified crime trends, and other tasks unique to intelligence gathering. The CIU disseminates bulletins to our partners in law enforcement and the security in the gambling industry, working together to ascertain information vital to ongoing investigations into suspected crimes and persons involved in them. Responsible gambling. The Bureau's responsibilities as it pertains to responsible gambling include administration of the statewide exclusion program, maintaining the exclusion management system, a database which provides a clearinghouse of information for card rooms to verify a patron's self-exclusion status, dissemination of responsible gambling information, and administration of the involuntary exclusion list. The research unit, the Bureau established a position to research gambling-related information within the state as well as nationally and internationally on an array of gambling-related topics. This information gathered is useful to the identification of trends, enforcement activities, development of regulations, input on bill analysis, and information sharing with our partners here and abroad. Regulations unit, the special program section is responsible for promulgating Bureau regulations and facilitating comments provided by the Bureau to the Gambling Control Commission in the development of commission-initiated regulations. Charitable gambling, California's Business and Professions Code sections 19985 through 19987 allow for eligible nonprofit organizations to conduct a fundraising using controlled games as a funding mechanism. Qualified nonprofit organizations and suppliers of equipment and or services for such fundraising event must submit an annual registration form to the Bureau of Gambling Control for prior approval. Business Profession Code section 19986 outlines the parameters for these fundraisers for the nonprofit organization and includes but is not limited to one fundraiser using controlled games per calendar year. The fundraiser may not exceed 5 consecutive hours. Individual prizes may not exceed $500 cash value, and total prizes may not exceed $5,000. At least 90% of the gross revenue shall go to the nonprofit organization. Nonprofit organizations must be in compliance with all applicable laws, regulations, and local ordinances. There are over 100,000 charities in California that may be eligible to register to conduct controlled games as a fundraising mechanism. Since January of 2007, the program has processed nearly 4,500 nonprofit organization applications and over 1,000 applications for suppliers and vendors, averaging approximately 688 applications per year. To determine the eligibility of the nonprofit organization and their scheduled event, the Bureau verifies with the Attorney General's Registry of Charitable Trusts the nonprofit's registration, verifies the nonprofit's tax-exempt status with the Franchise Tax Board, verifies the nonprofit's corporate status with the Office of the Secretary of State, and for the event approval, the Bureau verifies the event meets statutory parameters for time, start and end, location, and vendor status, verifies advertisement for the event promotes only controlled games. And finally, the Administrative Services Group is responsible for providing administrative, technical, and support services to the Bureau. Programs include human resources, budgets, legislation, facility management, information technology, contracts, purchasing, and accusations. Thank you again for this opportunity to comment, and I welcome any questions the committee may have.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. At this time, members will take a pause to do some questions for the folks in the Department of Justice. Any questions at this time? I'd like to drill down on a couple of things that the panelists just covered. First and foremost, some clarity on does the Bureau have jurisdiction over all forms of gaming that we're discussing here today in this hearing?
No. We are responsible for the card room industry, for the nonprofit organizations, and tribal oversight.
And, okay, thank you. What penalties are in place? You talked about some of the scams and some of the investigations that you've done. Does California statute have strict penalties in place to help with the prosecution of folks that engage in those types of activities?
Generally, we refer back to the penal code for the violations that are, thefts, embezzlement, the various general penal codes that apply to any kind of criminal activity. It's not specific to gaming.
So we don't have specific statute on those offenses, but rather the general penal code?
On those particular offenses, there are specific gaming-related sections that are applicable, but not for those types of crimes that I was referencing in my synopsis.
Okay. And we had some discussion of suitability standards. I was wondering if you could give the members of the committee a little more specific information as to what criteria would qualify for the denial of a license.
The Gambling Control Act outlines specific mandatory denial requirements. For example, if an individual had a felony conviction, that would deem mandatory denial. Certain crimes of moral turpitude within a certain time frame, within a 10-year time frame preceding the submission of the application. If the applicant had a conviction of such crime, that would deem necessary for a mandatory denial. Prohibited interest in gambling entities that are otherwise prohibited in California, that would be cause for a mandatory denial. There's a long list of circumstances that may qualify for that mandatory denial within the Gambling Control Act. There's many examples of discretionary denial, any types of convictions other than felonies. Depending on what the conviction is and what the crime is and what the background is of that crime and the circumstances that relate. We provide that type of detail to the commissioners to make their decision with regards to suitability.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. In regards to the possibility of an online version of gaming, what types of crimes or frauds do you think you'd encounter should this form of gaming be legal?
Some of the more noticeable that we have learned of through our research and interacting with some of the other locations that are already engaging in it, it tends to be identity theft, credit card fraud, possible collusion, money laundering, those types of criminal activities.
Mr. Gibson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This information certainly has been enlightening for me as a new member and a freshman assembly member. A couple questions. How many card rooms have you had to close down? I'm looking at a list. Do you have an accurate number? How many do we actually have operating, that's actively operating in the state, and how many that have been closed down by your office?
And what time frame would you be? And when we talk about closures, there's emergency closures, and then there's also revocation of a license. We've, in the last year, been we conducted an emergency closure of a card room.
What would be an emergency closure?
What's that?
What qualifies an emergency closure?
An immediate threat to the public safety.
Give an example.
In this particular case, it had to involve inadequate financing. There was not sufficient funding in order to be able to cover the cost of chips that were in use and that were in the hands of the public.
How many do we have operating in the state?
88.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Additional question related to the discussion we had towards the beginning of the hearing on exclusivity in Prop 1A. Can you give us specific games that exclusivity applies to?
Well, the easiest answer would be for the slot machines, which are the gaming devices. Those are probably what most people think of when they think of tribal gaming. But they're also allowed to offer banked and percentage games that no one other than the tribes with compacts can offer. So 21, I believe, the games that you typically find in New Jersey and Nevada.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this time? Mr. Jones Sawyer.
Mine's is kind of toward staffing and being able to handle all the regulatory things that have come down recently. One of you, and I apologize, mentioned your staffing, and it sounded like you're still handling things, but let's just say, for example, we started to increase the amount of your responsibilities. I'm concerned that you'll still be able to handle it with the same type of due diligence that you need to do. And since the inception of all the new gaming, you've increased, but it seems like staffing hasn't moved. Are we at the brink now that we need to call out the cavalry and get you more resources? He's laughing now. It's the first time I saw him smile, so that must be a yes.
No, I appreciate the question, Assemblyman Jones Sawyer. As you know, I've been in front of your committee recently, Public Safety Committee, requesting additional positions to address our significant backlog in our background investigations. We have a tremendous backlog right now. We do not have the sufficient amount of positions to keep up with the approximate 6,000 applications that we have coming in every year. And so we are trying to address that through approval of temporary positions right now to assess that backlog, as well as also submitting requests for permanent positions to handle the ongoing workload. If something such as internet poker is approved through the legislature and made lawful, then we will definitely need additional positions to keep up with our mandates as they are now, as well as whatever the proposed language or approved legislation will enact us to have that responsibility.
And I'll just say, and if this were to happen, and since I am over budget sub 5 public safety, you have carte blanche to ask for anything that you want.
That is on
if
record.
If this were to happen.
I heard it. Thank you.
Well, obviously, you guys are barely keeping your head above water right now as it is. So for Mr. Budget Subcommittee 5 Chair, they could use the help right now, let alone when if this does take off, internet gaming, because I'm very familiar with gaming, having done a little work for DOJ back in the day. So, I mean, how many are you backlogged right now? How many cases?
As of July 1st, we were backlogged approximately 2,400 investigations.
Well,
and
and
that's just on the card room side.
And that's really a key. If this does take off by chance, I would see them needing a need for substantial personnel, an increase in personnel, not just intermittent positions, full-time positions. So we're talking a considerable amount of bodies and resources to do it right.
Okay, Mr. Bigelow.
Since we're on the staffing component, maybe you could help us to understand how that would be funded, from what arenas, and what it would look like potentially.
For example, the BCP that we have before the legislators right now, because that work is specific to the card room licensing applications, then that would be supported by the Gambling Control Fund, which is also supported by the card rooms that submit their fees through applications and reimbursement of the money it takes the Bureau of Gambling Control to conduct those investigations.
So when we talk about the increased positions, would that come and follow from that mechanism, or would there be another mechanism by which you would obtain funding?
It would, in this particular situation, it would come from that existing funding source, which is sufficient in terms of funding right now.
So there's plenty of money in the bank account, in other words.
For the Gambling Control Fund. Now, if we
From
start
the-
talking about the Special Distribution Fund, that's...
No, I understand the special distribution fund, but I'm just wondering if there's enough funding in place, or if there was a need for some of that to be addressed in another manner, some way.
We do not currently see the need to, for example, increase any type of fees associated with it. The fund is sufficient as it is now.
That's what I'd like to hear on the record. Thank you.
Well, and following up on that question, if it's sufficient now, why haven't you gotten the bodies to come in and supplement that?
Just so I understand the question.
I came in late, so I may be missing part of this.
Probably the simple answer is over the last decade or so, there's been a number of budget reductions and prohibiting us from putting forth requests to increase our position authority. Certain budget letters specifying that we were not allowed to ask for increase in programs. But at this point in time, we're at a point where we have such a significant amount of backlog in those investigations, we have to request for those positions. And we have to move forward with the...
But to make it clear, you've asked for additional positions in the past, and you've been denied that, although the money was there.
Over the length of time, I can't comment as to whether or not there were requests, say, 5 or 6 years ago.
Since you've been there, have you asked for additional positions?
Yes.
And you've been turned down?
No, it's currently going through the legislature right now.
Right
Hopeful.
now, but previously?
Previous requests have not made it to the legislature prior.
Okay, but they've been submitted, and obviously somewhere you guys were shut down.
Correct.
Okay.
Did you guys cover the, from a regulatory standpoint, we have a bifurcated system of regulation. Can you explain the kind of the key advantage to that? And I'll note that this isn't the only state that has that policy, but could you give us a little more detail on that?
More of a checks and balances. We have, the investigatory and compliance aspect of it being conducted through the Bureau of Gambling Control, and then the adjudicatory authority through the Gambling Control Commission. So we bring forward accusations by way of the Administrative Procedures Act, for example, or the Gambling Control Act, and we present evidence to the Gambling Control Commission, and then determinations are made both on suitability for licensure as well as the accusation process when action is being taken against a particular licensee or an entity. The Gambling Control Commission would then act as the adjudicatory body for that. So you have essentially a checks and balances system set in place.
In respect to the Gambling Control Act, specifically the Gambling Control Act of 1997, has that strengthened the state's oversight of both private and tribal gaming? Is there anything you would highlight that might need improvement?
I'm just trying to follow that. So since 1997, would there be areas that we could see improvement with? Have anything, Stacy?